Hello. Seems to be, yeah. Seems to be working. So, yeah. I'm going to put my gloves on. Have you got gloves?
I've got hand gloves, yeah. I took them off and I'm like, actually, now stop walking.
It's a bit chilly. Yeah, I'll put thermals on. I was like, I'll put thermals on just in case, because otherwise...
It's just the rain I can't stand. And I think, yeah.
We'll see how we go.
There's been a couple of occasions where I've been at the football with... I've got two daughters, they both play. A couple of occasions where I've been at football and it's been raining and windy, and all the parents have kind of started off with umbrellas and then they just put them down because the wind's coming underneath them. So.
Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission here is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, did during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. Can we turn things around? We'll find out. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and just tell me what they do all day and let me record how this affects us. Thank you for listening.
So I normally start off with getting you to say your name for the recording, but we don't need to do that, so I'll just go straight into the questions. So first question is, what did you want to be when you grew up?
What did I want to be when I grew up? A pilot.
All right.
I actually applied to join the RAF when I was just leaving school, about 16, and I got rejected. I got rejected because of my eyesight, so I got as far as kind of the medical. And I'll never forget it. They sent my application back exactly as I'd sent it, but it just had a little post-it note on it, and it just said "not fit for pilot." And I was gutted. I really was, because I was kind of thinking, do I go down the commercial route or the kind of fast jet route with the RAF? And I think, ironically, now my eyesight's better than it ever has been. I've got 20/20 vision, so I think maybe back then it was kind of. Maybe it's balanced itself out now, I don't know. But yeah, that was a bit of a knock, to be honest. And I kind of took it on the chin, and I decided I'd just go and do a bit of travelling. So I got a job, temporary job, working in tech, in IT, on a service desk, just an IT support desk, and saved up a bit of money, went travelling, spent more than I was earning. Got home and went back into the same job. So I've kind of been working in tech ever since, really, primarily.
You're listening to Series 5, Episode 12, and to my guest, Dan Robinson. This is another in-person interview, and the first one recorded on the Rode Wireless Go 2, which I'm now a big fan of. We recorded this outside next to a railway line. Check this audio against Reinhard's bonus episode, and you'll hear the difference immediately. This was recorded on the 31st of January 2024. As you can tell from the opening, it was pretty cold. Tell me if I should put the temperatures next to the recording dates. Could be interesting. And whether it's chucking it down or not, maybe. I'll quote Dan's email response to being asked about some blurb for his show notes and intro. I have cleared this with him, by the way. Argh, do I have to talk about myself in the third person? What about this? Dan Robinson is a community organiser with a background in tech, sustainability and environmental action. A leader with infectious enthusiasm, he works cross-sector and has a passion for people development and creating community impact. He has led or founded a number of non-profit organisations, and he says, in his defence, he took some of that from their website. If you've got an interesting workplace, it would be great to record your interview in that space, even if you do work outdoors. So get in touch if you're ready to make the jump and record your Working Hours interview, and let me talk to you about what you do.
So the next question's, what are you doing now? I assume you're still with the tech. but you're also doing something else as well. So what is it you're
I
doing
am.
now?
Yeah, so I'm still in tech. This sort of accidental career, that's my background really, is the tech. But over the past kind of 4 or 5 years, I've been running something called Incredible Edible in Leeds. And I went down to 4 days last year in tech to give me sort of a day to run this. And it's all voluntary. And what we do is we create kind, confident and connected communities using food. And what that means is essentially we plant raised beds full of fruit, vegetables, herbs, all over Leeds in about 20 areas to show people where their food comes from, reconnect people with their food, whether it's kids or adults, and just create those kind of conversations around, hang on a minute, we don't need to fly strawberries in from Morocco all year round. Strawberries we can grow, or tomatoes, or lettuce, or herbs, or whatever we can grow in the UK seasonally. It tastes nicer, it's fresher, there's no pesticides on it. And I think as we have this kind of uncertainty around the climate, it's more important now more than ever that communities are sustainable and people are clued up a little bit on how they can sustain themselves.
And I guess the other side to that is creating spaces for them to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's that concept of we've kind of gone a little bit too far with the built environment, haven't we? In terms of there's a lot of concrete, there's a lot of this urban jungle that when we do have these climate extremes doesn't the lack of trees is an issue. Obviously there's the carbon side of it, but also trees do a really good job of kind of shading our cities and our towns and our villages,
Binding the soils together
and binding and the soil as well. So, and I think just providing a little bit of greenery. And I think what is great about this project is cuts across so many areas, because you've got the aspect of climate in terms of providing people with the food on their doorstep. So you're cutting down on the food miles, you're not having to ship the food around the world, you're cutting down on food waste as well, because you're only taking what you need. But also getting out and being part of a community, learning new things, cuts down on sort of people's poor mental health. It improves physical health as well. So there's lots of different outcomes.
Stress relief and just being in the fresh air.
That's it, getting people outdoors, away from screens and things like that.
So how did you get into it?
How did I get into it? It's so I've got 2 kids, 2 daughters, and my eldest is an absolute fruit fiend. She, if you put a punnet of strawberries in front of her, she'll demolish it. Whereas my youngest is a little bit more suspicious of foods, and she wouldn't eat fruit. She wouldn't try it at all, and it was almost like she knew that kind of something in a plastic punnet in the fridge wasn't there was a better option out there almost. And we dabbled with growing our own food, and one day she'd come in from outside and she had red around her mouth. She just helped herself to the strawberries growing in the garden. I thought, that's really interesting. And one day I was getting up for nursery. Her bedroom's at the front of the house, and I opened up the curtains and I just spotted this grass verge on kind of a road junction outside, and it's just this unused, unloved space that maybe the grass would be cut by the council 2 or 3 times a year, and I thought, we could do better with that. What if we planted strawberries there for the primary school kids to pick, when they walk one way to the primary school, and the secondary school kids to pick when they walk the other way to secondary school. And that's kind of how it started. So I did a little bit of research, found Incredible Edible, because it's not a new thing in Leeds. It's been running since 15 years. It started in Topperden. Found Incredible Edible, got talking to a few people there, spoke to Garforth in Bloom, our local kind of in Bloom group, and they kind of advised on sort of permissions and things like that, and kind of the best places to site beds. And we cracked on. We gave it a go. Interestingly, we were dead excited, ready to go for spring 2020. So we started kind of in Garforth in March, and obviously COVID hit, so it kind of knocked the wind out of ourselves a little bit. But then we sort of cracked on regardless. I'm really glad we did, because it's such a visual project. People don't expect to see food growing in public places. And when people saw it, and when people kind of, in lockdown, you got to go on one walk a day, and people were kind of going further and further on their one walk a day. And we had lots of people from different communities around kind of Garforth, around Leeds, getting in touch saying, how did you do it? And we thought, well, we can help them do that, but it wouldn't be right for kind of Incredible Edible Garforth to go into Kippax or to go into Crossgates. People are really proud of where they live and this sense of community. So there's an Incredible Edible Kippax, an Incredible Edible Crossgates, and we've kind of helped them get up and running. But they all sort of face the same barriers that we did in Garforth, which is why we created Incredible Edible Leeds. And it's an umbrella organisation. So we've got Incredible Edible Leeds that has insurance and a bank account and risk assessments and all that kind of governance that means that any area of Leeds that wants Incredible Edible can have it, because we'll create, an Incredible Edible Moortown, an Incredible Edible Bramley, an Incredible Edible Pudsey, and as I say, 20 different areas at the moment, but it's growing.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun, but it is growing kind of week on week.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we touched on COVID there, so we'll go straight into COVID. There's kind of two parts to this question. So the first part is thinking about going into lockdown. So the general trend seems to be either your work went through the roof and you were working all the hours just dealing with everything, or it dropped through the floor, or it didn't change.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously two sides to that, because there's my tech role, which just carried on really, because it was tech.
Working from home.
It was working from home, but
which I guess you were already doing on and off occasion.
Yeah, doing it, but obviously going from kind of working from home one day, maybe 2 days a week to full time. And sort of getting this kind of this sense of cabin fever. I mean, controversially, I quite enjoyed lockdown, because I think, being a parent to 2 young kids, I'm used to kind of going here, there and everywhere and, never really having any time. And all of a sudden you've got this kind of enforced period where actually you can sort of, and the weather helped, didn't it? Let's be honest. Getting out in the garden and just, I would do a day's work and I would go out in the garden and it was great. And I kind of missed that, especially, we're sitting here talking outside on a cold, dry January. At least it is dry. But, so that was fine, the tech side of it. And Incredible Edible, I think, as I mentioned, it probably took off because people had that time to kind of look around them and spend a bit more time outdoors when they were allowed. But equally, Incredible Edible is not really about food. It's about people. It's about bringing people together. We really struggled with that, obviously, during COVID. So we tried to sort of build this sense of community in Facebook groups, in WhatsApp groups, but it's not the same. It's not the same as kind of getting together. And I think this is certainly last year and this year is what we've really been excited about, is getting people back together, sort of developing some of those relationships we built online and bringing them in, into face-to-face. And it's just so much more valuable. I think everybody's sick of Zoom now, so it's good to get meeting face-to-face.
So has anything changed for you COVID-wise? Like, coming out of it, has there been any sort of long-term change to how you work or to this project?
From a tech perspective, yes, because I think obviously we showed that home working works. And I think it's taken a while, and obviously this term of now hybrid working has kind of bedded in, and I think it took me a while to kind of get into a bit of a routine in terms of, this is my day at home, this is my day in the office, and sometimes you go in the office and you don't get any work done because you're meeting people. But actually I think that kind of shows, and that's the same whether I'm working in tech or Incredible Edible. Just shows the value of relationships and actually getting out and meeting people and learning a little bit about them, that you just kind of, I don't know, you just don't get that in an online meeting, do you? It's pretty kind of, you sort of, that whole thing of, you're on mute. You just don't get that face to face.
You're frozen.
Yeah.
So just staying on COVID, with this space, I mean, it's an open space, so in a way it was, it must have been like a relief space as well as like you had somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And to a degree you can have a number of people in here, but they have to kind of social distance and so on. I suppose that all got easier when we started having the bubbles and...
It did, yeah. I mean, do you know what? You say that, I'd forgotten all of that.
Yeah, and the tears. Do you remember the tears?
The tears and yeah. But the sheer kind of ridiculousness of it. I was chatting to somebody who worked in a bar, and they were saying that, I think you remember the whole eat out to help out thing, and there was this thing where if you worked behind a bar, you would get the glasses, you would pour some pints, and you would put them on a tray, and you would carry the tray to a table of people, but you couldn't hand them the drinks. They had to take the glasses, but you just poured that pint, you just touched that glass, and we sort of forgot, didn't we, or maybe didn't appreciate that it was an airborne virus. So everything that we did in terms of washing our hands and things like that, it was kind of, did it make a difference? I don't know. But yeah, social distancing, when we started to kind of come out of COVID, we started to do a few events, and on a very basic level, what we did was we had a stall, and we had it on the main street in Garforth, and we handed out free seeds to people. Fruit and veg seeds. And in fact, that was something I was really proud of that we did in COVID. We handed out seed packs. So we handed out little trays, a bit of soil for the tray, and some seeds. So people who were shielding had something to do, something to care for, something to nurture, something that had an end product.
Something that changed over time.
That's it, yeah. And we went round, we kind of drove round delivering those. But yeah, when we sort of came out of COVID, that was that kind of almost our sort of reintroduction to the community to say, look, hi, we're here, this is what we're doing, find us online, but we hope to be doing kind of more face-to-face. And it seems to take forever, didn't it, kind of coming out of lockdown. Then there was another lockdown, then we came out of that lockdown, then another lockdown, and eventually we sort of built up that kind of confidence and resilience, I think, as well. And yeah, this kind of ridiculousness of, we did a seed stall to hand out seeds, but actually we didn't really hand them out. We sort of had them there that people would then come and collect, you know, because everyone had gloves on and things like that. But we were all outdoors and we were all social distancing, and it was, you know, we sort of, it's hard to sort of keep 2 meters apart, isn't it? Unless you've got one of those kind of big hula hoops that you're kind of wearing to keep people from getting too close. But I think, as I say, this isn't a project about food, it's about people, and that human connection is so important. So it's definitely a challenge, yeah.
Yeah, and like you say with the Zoom meetings, it's also about being place-based, about physical space, meeting in physical space. So yeah, I can see how that was frustrating, but did it help you did you get a boost of awareness from it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, don't get me wrong, it was, and yeah, social media and just kind of having these open sessions and things online, whether it was Zoom or Teams or whatever we used as a video conferencing tool. But we always celebrate community. That's why it's important that we've got incredible edible wherever. Yeah. Because people are proud of where they live, and whenever someone gets in touch with us and says, hey, look, I've seen your project in Garforth or wherever, I really want to do it where I live, we go out and meet them. Yeah. And we say, right, great, show us your community, show us where you think this would work. And we've got the knowledge and we've got the skills and the experience to kind of advise them and say, right, you know what, that's a great location for a planter, but have you thought about how you're going to water it, or have you thought about where the sun kind of comes over? Because actually, if you just move it a few meters over that way, it'll get sunlight and it won't be under the shade of that tree or whatever. So it's... And we're doing some fantastic stuff now on a city-wide level in terms of, you know, working with schools, working with care homes, working with the council, working with the library service, working with the university, just to kind of, really kind of bring people together through this commonality of human connection using food, because food's a leveler, right? Everyone's got to eat, everyone loves food, and the kind of tagline of Incredible Edible, or one of them is, if you eat, you're in.
That's very good. Okay, so we've kind of touched on it, so I'm going to jump straight into social media. So again, consider this for both roles, but what I want to look at with social media is how much time you spend on it and whether you think you get a good return on investment from that time. Like, do you get the results that you want?
Yeah, it's mixed. I think for every person you reach through social media, there'll be a load of people that you don't reach, either who are on social media or who are not. So I'm terrible. I'm not on social media. I have been in the past.
Yeah. I don't think that's terrible. I think that's very advisable.
Well, for various different reasons. I mean, I've had a number of goes with Facebook, for example, and then I found out I was just looking at cat videos, wasting time that I could be spent outdoors or doing whatever.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn, and I probably use that more for kind of the tech role, but I'm starting to use that a little bit more for Incredible Edible, because I sort of noticed that obviously LinkedIn is kind of a business platform, and a lot of businesses are kind of looking at how they can, look at how they're being more responsible for the environment and how they can support organisations that are doing that. So it kind of makes sense for us to do a little bit on there with Incredible Edible. But we do have a presence on social media, and I've got some fantastic people that look after that, so I don't have to. But we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. I think we've experimented with Threads, and we've done a few YouTube videos on a YouTube channel. I think Instagram we get a lot of engagement on there. I think because it's such a visual project as well, and obviously Instagram is a visual platform. Facebook's a funny one. Facebook seems to go through phases of, depending on which way the wind's blowing, or the algorithm or whatever of that day. And Twitter's quite toxic. I personally think. I don't know if anyone else thinks that, but it's if you want to have an argument, go on Twitter. But I think, generally speaking, I don't think we've had any negative comments really on social media. Occasionally you'll get people going, oh, what about this, what about that? There's a lot of whataboutism, especially when it comes to like vandalism. But we've always said, you know what, if a kid, and it's not always kids by the way, it's quite often can be older people who should know better, especially when they've had a few babies. But we've always said, look, if someone pulls up one of our crops and they go, oh, that's what a cabbage looks like when it's growing, then we've achieved everything we've set out to achieve, because we've taught somebody where their food comes from. And we've had it, we put a planter in place in one of our communities, and the planters are pretty solid. That you put them in, they're not going anywhere. There's like 3 tons of soil in them. The planters are fine. Once they're in, they're in. We put a planter in, we left it a week, we planted it up. Within 24 hours, everything had been ripped out. So we replanted it. Same again, got ripped out. Planted it again, it's been fine ever since. So it's that kind of like, I don't know if it's the power of 3 or just this, if it's new and it's exciting, but again, if someone learns something through that experience, then great. And again, just on that actually, people, I was weeding one of the planters once, and somebody walked past, an old lady, and she said, oh, I wouldn't take anything out of there. I said, oh, why's that? She said, well, you don't know where it's been.
It's been here.
Exactly. It's right here. And I get that. I get that, food in a public place, people aren't maybe sure where it comes from.
That's conditioning as well. It's like the thing of, don't pick things that are growing in nature naturally. Like, why? Oh, it might have dog pee on it or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but if you got it from a farm, it might be covered in petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides. And do you want to eat that?
That's it. And we always have raised planters because of dogs primarily, but also because they're accessible. People can get to them, in a wheelchair or kids. They're a perfect height. But I would say that, if people are worried about where their food comes from, spend 5 minutes in the fruit and veg section of your local supermarket and watch everybody fingering to get the best apple. Or, oh no, don't like that one. I've seen the local Tesco's where people come out the toilets and, you just don't know. You're like, have they washed their hands? I don't know. But, food is flown all around the world. There are over 1,000 different...
And handled by machines and people.
And people, picked, packed, shipped. But there are over 1,000 different pesticides that almost always will kill a living organism. That's available on the Food Standards Agency website, and scary. Whereas our stuff is just there. It's just there for people to pick. And in the same way that, when I was younger, I used to go blackberry picking and things like that. And I think it's sort of like a lost generation, isn't it? People are sort of a little bit wary. Can I take this? I'm not really sure. I'm not going to name them, but there was a business who they actually had an orchard behind their premises, apple trees, pear trees, and come the autumn time, the apples and the pears would fall to the ground. There was no one there
to rot,
and they'd rot, and then they would get pests.
Yeah.
They would get rats and things come in. So in order to stop that happening, they cut down all the trees.
Just let people in.
Yeah, yeah.
Give away free fruit, and then how good do you look to everybody?
Well, it's just there's plenty of food out there to feed us as a nation. There could be more, there should be more, and that's kind of part of what we're trying to do is sort of encourage more people to grow their own food, because we are in a changing climate. We are going to have a bit of an issue. There's new rules come into effect recently, actually, where there's going to be more checks on meat and fruit and vegetables coming in from the EU. That's going to have a knock-on impact. I remember about 18 months ago there was a big sort of tomato shortage because of a poor crop in Europe. Some of the easiest things you can grow yourself, tomatoes. We're happy to send out seeds to people. We do a lot of that. It's a big part of what we do, just giving out seeds, encouraging people to just try it at home. What's the worst that could happen? I think sometimes people think you need these.
It doesn't grow.
That's it. I think sometimes people think you need a particular set of skills to grow your own food, but part of it's the journey. Enjoy the journey, and you'll get some success, you'll get some failure, and that's part of life as well.
Yeah, and it's a long, slow learning curve. So it's patience and waiting, and I had another question that I wanted to ask about, but I think I've forgotten it. I'll go straight into climate change. Again, considering both roles. So, as you're aware, Leeds has declared a climate emergency, and I want to look at sort of, because it's going to get to a point where people are feeling and seeing direct impacts on their work from climate change. I can remember the day that it was 39 degrees in Leeds, and it was like, I'm not going into work because I don't want to travel on buses. I don't want to do this. I'm still working from home, but that was like, that's a direct impact. And not everybody will think like that. In your roles, what are you doing to promote awareness, adaptation, mitigation of climate change? Is that something that you can easily do in both roles, and is it sort of part of both roles?
Yeah, I've got this track record of building incredible edible planters that every time I build one, it's biblical rain. However, I remember that day when it was 39 degrees. Well, I was building that. I remember when it was 39 degrees because I was building an incredible edible planter, and that was not pleasant. I think a lot of people went to the gym that day because of the aircon. But it's a funny one. I mean, I've mentioned climate a lot just while we've been talking, but actually we don't really talk about it too much with Incredible Edible, because I think it's big, it's scary, it's kind of in your face, and I think when you you don't want to end up, or we don't want to end up preaching.
Yeah, and it also, because it's being politicised, it's like you're politicising something that you not necessarily passing under the radar, but you're like, this isn't political, it's just growing food we all need to eat, and we all need spaces to, just natural spaces and space to be in.
And that's it. Yeah, there's a lot of projects out there, that focus on a specific group of people, or, they're only open to other members of the community. This is open to everybody. If you eat, you're in. And I think it's great in that we get on with everybody, and we don't want to offend anybody. But the very nature of what we're doing has a positive impact on the planet. So I'm okay with that. And I think I would love to see more of it across the city. But we would never go into an area, we would never go into a community. If you plot where we're growing on a map across Leeds, there's some pretty kind of big gaps. But we don't want to go, right, we're going to go into that space, because that's not how it works. It's always community-led. We want the community to come to us and tell us, what's great about their community. Because I think sometimes we have this tendency to look on an area and go, oh, it's a really deprived area, or it's a really rough area. But actually, the people living in that area might not feel deprived. They might have a lot going on that we need to celebrate. And So a lot of what we do is around enablement and around empowerment of those communities. So we do rely on them coming to us. And I'm sure it will come up in a conversation around climate, because I think one of the things, I'll tell you what, we put one planter in and we had a local school come along. And I asked the kids, I said, right, what should we grow here? And they said, I don't know. I said, what fruit and veg do you like? If you could grow any fruit or any vegetables here in this planter, what would you grow? Oranges and apples was the answer. Now, if it's consistently 39 degrees, it might be possible. But typically, we probably wouldn't get much of a crop in the outdoors generally. But I think that stuck with me, because actually we are in a changing climate, and it's absolutely possible. I found out the other day that some of the champagne houses in the Champagne region of France have been buying up land in Kent, in the southeast of England, because we're in a changing climate and they're thinking long term. So I think that's, we can educate people, but we don't want to preach to people from an incredible edible perspective. I think tech is interesting because the more data we use, the more emails we send, the more we use AI and ChatGPT and things like that, it has an incredible impact on the planet in terms of energy use, in terms of water use to cool down data centers. And I think that does go under the radar. I think some of the big sort of cloud platforms, the likes of Google, Amazon, Microsoft, are doing a good job in terms of building in some tools around sustainability into their platforms, and also a lot of their data centers claim to be sustainable or using renewable energy, that kind of thing. I think there'll be a tipping point. I think eventually, there's a responsibility for organisations. You talk about measuring Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions. The Scope 3 emissions, if you're an organisation using Google, Microsoft, Amazon services, that's a kind of Scope 3 emission. And at some point in time, there may be legislation to say, well, you've got to start measuring those, you've got to start reporting those. And I think that might be the tipping point where everybody kind of goes, right, you know what, there's that trade-off. It's always a trade-off. The more you use tech, the more of an impact you have on the environment, the planet, and that kind of, there needs to be that trade-off accordingly. And it's not just going out planting trees, because if you plant a little sapling, that could take 30 plus years to actually start absorbing carbon in enough quantity to kind of meet net zero targets and things like that. So.
Do you use any tech within Incredible Edible? Do you use anything to kind of crunch information or look at the best places to do something, or soil pH?
Yeah. It's a great question. It is something that we're looking at. We're having some conversations at the moment about starting to build in sensors around soil quality, as you say, but also air quality. I think it comes up a lot when we put in a planter maybe on the side of a road, on a grass verge, on a road junction. People kind of go, what about the pollution? Well, particulates tend to fall, so they come out of an exhaust and they tend to fall. So again, having the raised planters helps. Again, we just advise people to wash the food. At the end of the day, you're breathing in that air. If you're standing on the side of the road taking food from that planter, you're breathing it in. But what we want to be able to do is to back that up with data. So having a little air quality sensor, having a soil quality sensor. I did see actually a couple of years ago, someone was experimenting with wireless sensors that would alert you to when the soil and the plants were getting a little bit dry and they needed watering, but equally as well, it would alert you to when they'd been overwatered. So obviously a lot of our planters are outdoor. We don't usually have an issue with watering because we're in quite a wet climate, but also as we do get those extremes, there's usually a few months of the year where watering we spend a lot of time doing that. Do
you have water butts?
We do, yeah. I mean, we put a lot of thought into where we site the planters in the first place. You know, we always try and make sure that, and people do it all the time. People come to us and go, "Oh, I've seen your planter over here. I'd really like to have a planter near me." And we say, "Yeah, great, we can help you with that. Would you be willing to look after it?" So then what happens is, as the number of groups grows, as the number of planters grows, the number of volunteers grows with it. So we're reaching another person and helping them kind of, build their knowledge, but also there's someone there to look after that planter, water it, make sure it's weeded, not vandalised, that kind of thing.
Nice. One thing, I'll ask this before I go back onto the questions. One thing I've always thought about is, and we've kind of given an example of this, but like all the apple trees around Leeds or the rhubarb that's grown in people's gardens, a lot of the time that people don't even use or harvest or do anything with. And I always wanted a way, and I know there are a lot of people as well who just can't cope with the gardens that they've got. And I was like, it would be great if people could just use those spaces and grow in them and or collect the, like harvest the food. Like, have you touched on any of that area, tried anything like that?
There are a couple of organisations actually. So there's, I think there is a scheme where you can sort of rent your garden as like an allotment. But there is an organisation called Leeds Urban Harvest that go out and kind of collect apples and pears and things.
They do the big cider pressing, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and they accept donations as well. They do big cider pressing, and there's an organisation called Fruitworks as well that can come out and do one of those events in terms of either apple juicing to make cider or apple juice, but they also do other workshops like fruit tree pruning as well, so you can learn new skills with them.
Yeah, and that can be, like, I know someone who's got a plum tree that's just overwhelming and the tree gets overburdened and then it's sort of like starting to break, and it's like such a shame because there's a like bumper crop there that could be used.
Definitely.
So where are we up to? Let's do Brexit. I don't think this will necessarily have impacted you that much, but it might do. So the question here is, has it changed what you do at all? Have you felt any impact or any change from Brexit?
I don't think so. Could be too early to say. As I say, there's another set of kind of rules going through now that I was reading up on briefly, but I'll probably need to look into in a bit more detail about additional fruit and vegetable checks. So that could lead to shortages over here, which...
What about seeds? Because it's very much like, I know in green circles there's a big thing about saving seeds.
Saving seeds, yeah.
And most of the seeds in the world come from the Netherlands or America.
Yeah.
So, like, are we self-reliant in terms of seeds and things that we need? Do you know? I
don't think we are. I think it's a concern. I mean, we're an island, right? And we do import. I saw a statistic the other day. I think we import like 80% or something of our
because we
food.
Used to be self-reliant.
Absolutely.
Then,
yeah. I mean, that's insane. 80%. And then we've just kind of left the EU. That seems a little bit counterintuitive. But as I say, we don't do politics. People, the majority voted for it, and so we are where we are. And I don't think we have seen any kind of major swings. We've not been, just put in a massive order, big bulk purchase of seeds and compost and tools and things, sort of, to kickstart our groups for 2024. And we didn't have any problems getting any materials. Again, in the tech role, I don't think we've seen an impact. A lot of what we do in tech is within the UK anyway. It is a part of a larger kind of European-based organisation, and it's not been... The only thing I've noticed is when I have travelled abroad with work and I've had to go in the non-EU line, which, invariably doesn't have as many border control staff and you're queuing for longer. So that's kind of part and parcel of it, I guess. But
so we've done climate change, COVID, we've done social media and Brexit. So I'll go on to the change question. Again, consider this for both roles. So the question is, if you could change any three things about what you do, what would you change? But I'll give you this as well because you're in the sort of climate area. So you can have like 3 fantasy ones for Incredible Edible and then maybe 3 practical ones. So what would be the kind of things that you'd want to do? What would be the ideal for Incredible Edible?
The ideal. So Leeds Leeds is a sustainable food city. It has a bronze award, and it's just applied to get the silver award, which I think it will get, because it's doing some amazing things. The biggest thing that I would like to see in Leeds is something that Incredible Edible is doing nationally, which is this concept of a right to grow. So everything we do is sort of permissions based, you know, especially when it comes to public land. If there's a grass verge out there that, as I mentioned earlier, that, you know, this is how this story started. If it's unused and unloved, then we want to adopt it. And we want to grow food on it. And if we're growing food on it, we'll maintain around it as well. So, you know, the raised bed doesn't take up all the grass verge, so we'll cut the grass. So we put the raised bed there, we look after it, we turn it into a productive, abundant source of food, but also we're maintaining that space, we're looking after it. So from a council perspective, it's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? Because we're taking that on, you know, we want to kind of improve that relationship so that it's a trust-based relationship. Whereas at the moment, it's permissions-based. So this right to grow is essentially trying to make it easier for people to grow food, but not just food, maybe plant wildflowers or plant trees, but making it easier for people to do that. So a large part of that is around mapping, and it doesn't have to be the council that does it. But if the council want to provide their existing mapping, that will be useful. The community can contribute to that, because sometimes there are land assets that, you know, no one really knows who owns them.
The map is not the territory.
Exactly, yeah. So between us, again, improving this relationship between the local authority and the people whom it serves, to create this map of areas that are suitable for community cultivation, food, trees, wildflowers, whatever. So that if an individual or a group somewhere in the city of Leeds or nationally decides that they have a patch near them that they want to do something with because it's just sitting there, it's not doing anything, they approach the council says, hang on, let's check our map. Oh yeah, that site's suitable because it's on our map. There you go. So it kind of flips that around. Instead of asking for permission and the council going, well, where's your insurance, where's your risk assessment, where's this, where's that? All of a sudden, the community are empowered to take on that asset. They're maintaining it on behalf of the council, so there's a cost saving. That's kind of where we want to get to. That's the sort of inspirational. And I think within that, there's a lot to be said for sort of people power, this power of community. Believing in the power of small actions, in so much as we started in Leeds, this journey of Incredible Edible Leeds. We had Incredible Edible Argh up in Guiseley that started 10 years ago, and they have a few beds around the area. But then we started with one bed in Garforth, which then we've now got like 12 beds in Garforth, but we've also got 20 areas of the city with Incredible Edible groups. But there's still more. There's still more that want it, and there's still more that could have it, and we've just got to kind of get to a point where we're comfortable and everyone feels like it's the norm. And I think it's a journey. It's a journey that I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed going on and working proactively, because I think, you know, when we're bold and when we're brave and we take these decisions, it really has a long-lasting impact. You know, Leeds City Council was brave and bold in their kind of policy around making Leeds a city where no one needs to have a car. So that they've done a lot of work around the infrastructure, around walking and cycling, active travel. Let's build Incredible Edible into that. You know, so when people are walking and cycling around the city, there's fresh food there for them. How many times have you gone to the supermarket to buy a plant, a basil plant, or a rosemary plant, or a chive plant, when you just need a little bit for your meal? That's what we're trying to get to. You know, we've got a partnership with Northern Rail where we've started to do this concept of edible stations, so that when people get off the train, they can collect food or an ingredient for their dinner and then go home.
Yeah. Make yourself a fresh mint tea at the station.
Absolutely, yeah, that's it. And mint's one of those things that, yeah, when we plant it, we advise people to plant it in a pot because it takes over,
Yeah. So, yeah, how many is that in terms of changes, for ideal changes? That's a right to grow, so that's one.
Yeah. It's one massive change, yeah. What else would I change? I think, so we got a bit of funding this year, last year, Incredible Edible Leads, which we've always been limited by capacity. So there's 3 of us. We created Incredible Edible as a community interest company, a social enterprise, to have a bit of structure, to kind of have that kind of limited liability, but also it's a separate legal entity, so it can take on.
And it protects yourself as well, because it's more liable than you are.
Yeah, exactly. But it gives it the freedom as an entity to take on assets of land or property or whatever.
And it's got the asset lock as well.
Yeah,
so,
that's it. So any money it makes goes back into the organisation. But there's 3 of us as directors who are all volunteers, and Incredible Edible is run by volunteers. It's really kind of, there isn't this central pot of funding or anything like that in terms of resource. So we'd got some lottery funding last year, and that enabled us actually to hire a project coordinator who's been incredible. She's been fantastic. And she's been getting out and meeting people and making connections and building partnerships. And we want to keep that. But also, and I said this when we set up Incredible Edible, I want to create jobs. I want to create local jobs. I want to create and contribute routes to employment for, urban agriculture, for example, because we do have this lost generation. That statistic at 80% of our food being imported, and what you said that, don't want to sound like Uncle Albert, but during the war, everyone was out there digging for victory, growing their own food, and we've lost those skills. We've got this lost generation. So, yeah, that's my kind of inspiration is to create jobs, but to create this sort of pathway into employment by, working with education providers to create this food growing kind of accreditation almost, because I think there's a lot of courses and things on horticulture and kind of land management, but actually when it comes to just food growing, I think there's maybe a little kind of bite-size something we could offer.
Yeah, I mean, because the knowledge is kind of there, but it's not always going to be there, and it's not diffused in the right way for people to just, and there is no world in which everyone turns into the good life, and we're all Tom and what was her name?
Remember, but I remember
That's
it.
terrible.
I remember the good line. Yeah. But no, I think it's maybe this is the kind of third thing as well, which is just we can only do what we can do, and again, we don't want to come across as sort of preachy and say you must grow your own food. Or all we're trying to do is provide people with the confidence and the skills to give this a go if they want to.
Yeah,
and we'll
also,
always be there to help them.
Have a space to do it. So, I'd love to grow food, but I don't feel that I have the confidence or the skills all the time, or So, yeah, it's great to have spaces to kind of go and do something like that, or get involved, or get someone that will help you, or will advise on spaces. And yeah, you do need that knowledge. It's like it has to be learned, it has to be developed. And you can't just read a book on growing food or watch a YouTube video. You have to do it.
You've got to give it a go,
Yeah, because you don't know what the soil's like. You don't know how much light it's getting. You have to test that and sort of find it. And if people are already experienced in doing that, they've got that knowledge. They can advise you quickly of like, move that, like you say, of just move it a bit into the sun.
And that's it. When people join Incredible Edible, they join this network, this amazing community of people who have been there. When people are starting, I always say to people, the first bed's always the hardest when you're setting up a project from scratch, because there's a lot that goes into it, but as soon as it's there, you're away, you're up and running. And I think when we ask people what are their barriers, land is one of them. Spaces to grow food, and that's where this kind of public right to grow comes in, this community right to grow, but also being a little bit innovative. And again, I think Leeds City Council are generally in a lot of the schemes and things that they do, but looking at tower blocks, for example, we've got a lot of tower blocks in Leeds, we've got a lot of terraced housing, and there's things that we can do there to support people with growing their food. There's things in terms of resource we can provide as well. When we typically help groups get going by providing them with their first bed.
Yeah.
So, the planter, the wood, the soil, the seeds, and then away they go. But equally, we can also be resourceful as well. We can beg, borrow and steal if we need to.
And I guess with all of that, I guess you are trying to, as much as possible, source all of that locally.
Yeah.
I guess Leeds Wood Recycling's in there somewhere. And
We've just done an amazing project. Well, I say we've just done. We're in the process of. We've just got it all booked in. There are a couple of little veg libraries. So this was a scheme that Fear Leeds set up with little veg libraries, one in Guiseley, one in Garforth, and they're looked after by Incredible Edible groups. So Incredible Edible Leeds has worked with Leeds Wood Recycling. We're putting on a workshop for our volunteers to go and learn woodworking skills. So first of all, people pick up some new skills, but then they're actually going to go away from that workshop with a kit, which is a little veg library. So they're going to take that back into their community, build a little veg library, and kind of grow that scheme. And the idea of a little veg library, if you've seen the little free libraries where you give a book, take a book, a little veg library is the same. We've had people from allotments gives kind of surplus veg there, or extra seedlings, or seeds, or tools, or growing magazines, anything that's kind of food related, and that's been fantastic. And really glad to kind of see that rolled out to more areas of Leeds, because rather than just and I think there's a few more actually. I think there might be one at the university and one in Chapel Allerton, but to get a few more in other communities would be great.
There's always more stuff going on in Leeds. That's what I'm discovering. Of you scratch the surface and you think that there's stuff in a particular area. It's like, oh, Leeds has got so much of X thing. And then you look a bit more and it's like, there's loads of this. We've got loads of it.
Yeah.
So, and you don't always know.
And Incredible Edible Leeds has actually sort of evolved in a way, in that it's more of an organisation that does enable and empower. It didn't always used to be. It just kind of did food growing. But, we've worked with local artists to create murals in 2 areas of the city, where previously you had someone who wanted to do something but didn't have insurance or didn't have risk assessments, method statements. Well, we've got all of that, because that's why we created Incredible Edible Leeds. So we kind of enabled that to happen. And I think, as you say, when you scratch the surface and you get to know people, and you get, as I say, we go out to people and we say, show us your community, and they say, oh, well, we've wanted to do this for years. And straight away, that makes me really sad. When someone's there, go, I've wanted to do this for years. Well, why have you not done it? Oh, well, because of this, because of that. Right, we can help with that. Let's make it happen. And that's been fantastic, because I think it's wherever we can help, we will. Because we're not really about food, we're about community.
Yeah. So we've kind of covered the 3 changes. Do you want to add any for your day job?
For the day job?
I mean, you're down to 4 days a week. You've
I'm
got
down to
this
4 days.
project on now, so
Yeah,
I guess that's...
I mean, the tech role's a funny one, because, I mean, tech changes daily.
Yeah.
And if you don't move with it, you'll get left behind. I think I am very much a people person. I love this sense of kind of inspiring people to kind of, follow their passions, so that they realise that they have the kind of power and potential to change the world around them.
Yeah.
Which is pretty deep, but I think that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I think if I don't have that, if I'm kind of lacking that sense of purpose, then I really struggle. And that's why I love Incredible Edible. And that kind of 1 day a week, plus weekends, so it's kind of 3 days a week really. I don't get a day off. And then I've got the 4 days in the tech role. And yeah, the tech side of it, I'd probably want to change that, so I'm doing something a little bit more purposeful. But also, I think sustainability in tech is huge. I think there's a lot of greenwashing out there. I think, people are kind of hiding behind their responsibilities a little bit, because some organisations have this drive of profit over people. So yeah, being able to work for someone that really looks after their people first before profit, and a lot of companies say that. But they're not necessarily walking the...
It's easy to say, isn't it?
It's easy to say, yeah. But the moment that kind of investors come knocking, all of a sudden, all of that kind of people-first rhetoric goes out the window. So yeah, an organisation that's people-first, that kind of is prioritising its people, but also its responsibilities to the planet and to the community in which it operates and serves. I think those are probably the changes I'd make. Yeah.
I'm just thinking before I go into UBI, so I'll do the UBI question and then I'll come back to just our previous discussion about this space and sort of creating the space. So, universal basic income, which I assume you're familiar with.
I am, yeah.
Because you're in a green space, so you're going to know about it. So, if there was a universal basic income, how would that change things for you, do you think? And again, maybe consider both roles.
Yeah, how would it change things for me? I think it would, on a personal level, enable me to, and it sounds pretty kind of cliche, but it would enable me to go out and do good, without kind of worrying about, how I'm paying the bills. If that makes sense. There's been successful trials of UBI all over the world, and what'd be great? There have been local authorities who have been brave and bold and innovative, but we never seem to get that in government. And that's something that I'd like to change. Is let's trial it. We trialled a 4-day working week, and there's been pros and there's been cons off the back of that. And I took that decision myself to take a pay cut and go to 4 days last year in March time. Probably took me till about maybe January. Oh, we're in January now. To get that right and to work out kind of what works for me in terms of a good balance and routine. I think routine's important. But I think UBI, the biggest difference we would see, we have thousands of people in this country who have caring responsibilities, and they don't get paid for that. Those are unpaid caring responsibilities. That's the biggest difference we would see. It would improve the economy. Everyone's obsessed with the economy, right? Everyone's obsessed with GDP rather than kind of, maybe measuring happiness or anything like that.
Do you know what I hate with that? When the news does the thing of like, it snows for a day and it's like, the economy's lost 50 million. No, it hasn't. It hasn't made it. You can't lose what it's not made, you stupid journalist.
It's this obsession of GDP and, decisions are made that affects this and affects that. And actually, if we stopped obsessing so much over that and started to look at our people, when you consider, right, cost of living, we're in a cost of living crisis. Let's just think about that for a second. A cost of living. That's obscene. We shouldn't have a cost of living.
Yeah.
It's just in any developed economy or any developed country.
Civilization. Any civilization.
Yeah.
It should be, hello, you are a citizen and a civilian here. Welcome. Not like, oh, you've been born, sod off.
Yeah. I mean, look, just going back to UBI then. So we've got childcare costs are ridiculous. People are not going to work because it's cheaper for them to not work and look after the kids than it is to work and put the kids in childcare. I say that as a parent, and we've always been fortunate as parents. But a UBI would help get more people into work. Because, those unpaid carers, those with childcare responsibilities that can't afford the childcare, if people are obsessed with the economy, well, actually, a UBI would help.
And it would also, the thing that frightens them is this idea that people might not work. Good. Not everyone should be at work.
Yeah.
It's like, do you want to have children? Do you want to have future generations? Someone has to look after them.
Yeah.
Someone has to look after, everybody. At some point, we're all going to age and need care and so on.
And this is it. Again, councils up and down the country have gone bankrupt, and councils up and down the country have been prioritising adult social care. Well, if those who have caring responsibilities have a UBI, that might then enable them to take on more caring responsibilities that frees up the local authority. There are so many benefits to the NHS, to local authorities, to individuals.
It makes being poor affordable. That's the key thing.
And the other thing is that the regular payment of, like, if you're homeless or something, then at least you know, all right, so you might spend it on booze one week to get through the week or whatever, but you know there's another payment coming, and you're like, I'm going to save that one. I'm going to put that towards something. You know, like, you can plan.
Yeah, it's... I have a list of things that piss me off. Sorry. But homelessness is one of them, and I think it's totally fixable, it's totally avoidable. There's a whole host of reasons why people are homeless. But we found during COVID a place for everyone on the streets to bed down for the night. And I think, yeah, okay, it was only a temporary measure, but that showed that we had the power and potential and will to do something. And it's fixable, and it seems to be getting worse, which shows we've let people down. Absolutely let people down. And again, yeah, you know, you mentioned it with UBI, that would again help with that.
The other thing that I think as well is that there's, you know, all this flag waving in the country, this and the country that. There is no country. There is just, like, we are at the point of Margaret Thatcher of just individuals and families and stuff, because. What is there? You know, like, other than the BBC and the NHS, what is there nationally? Like, there's a flag and there's, like, but what do you get? You work, you pay tax. What do you see from that? You don't necessarily see anything from it. And if we were all getting a UBI, we're all getting something together. We're all part of something.
You feel part of something.
Like,
yeah, I get that.
There is, I think there's a social cohesion element of, like, you can only destroy your social cohesion so much.
Yeah, I was talking about this the other day to someone. I think there's just let this train go past. I think there's a lot of trauma off the back of COVID. I think, you know, I mentioned earlier that I quite enjoyed lockdown. That's unusual. A lot of people struggled because a lot of people were on their own. A lot of people found it hard, and we heard that directly through Incredible Edible. We had a lot of people kind of come to us because they felt, you know, they were lonely or they were suffering from poor mental health, and Incredible Edible gave them an outlet. And I think understanding that kind of shared love of something and shared network is so important. And I think, yeah, we have had that erosion of community, and people are feeling pretty desperate. People are feeling pretty hopeless. They've gone through all of these different crises: cost of living, you know, cost of energy, cost of this, cost of that. Everything's going up. Quality's going down, and we're feeling pretty hopeless about it. And I think it's something's got to change.
Yeah.
Something's got to change, and you know, people are talking about a general election this year and potentially a new government. Will that change things? I hope it will, but who knows?
No. I firmly believe no change is forthcoming from them. It will be from us, you know, from below upwards.
Well, that's a really good point, because I think when you look back at history, a lot of change has come from the people. That's what we're trying to do from Incredible Edible. I mean, the very act of planting a seed is a revolutionary act. And I think the more we get people engaged to show them the power that they have, you know, and don't get me wrong, we're not inciting riots, but actually people want to grow their own food, and they want to be sustainable. They want to feel like they've got control over, you know, where their food comes from.
Their life.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's the other thing with, you know, not sort of getting anything from being a British citizen. It's like control as well. Like, where do we exert power? Where can we exert power? You know, and unless you have the money, do you have any power? Yeah. And then this is a space where you can sort of, like, you've made literal physical change here that you can see. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, all of this, you know, the space that we're in, it's about an acre in size. It's Leeds City Council land. Yeah. It's owned by the housing department. They've very kindly let us use this space. We're still working on the formal written agreements, but it was all covered in brambles. It had previously been used for fly tipping. working with the local councillors, they managed to get us a couple of skips that we filled. We put a pathway around it, and it's been a real example of kind of the power of people, but the power of kind of positive relationships to actually, rewild it. We've zoned it, we've got beehives, we've got a pond, we've got a willow dome, a den building area for kids, we've planted fruit bushes, we've got wildflowers in here, but there's also that kind of full life cycle. We've planted habitats for bats and birds and bug hotels and things, but there's composting as well, so people can see that actually what is grown and then pruned or harvested is then turned back into the soil, and it's every time people come in, they say there's usually one of two things they say. First one is, didn't know this place existed, which is great. We've achieved something. And the second one isn't necessarily what they say, actually. It's more about what you see. And I'm quite observant, and you sort of see this kind of... From when they enter and when they leave, they seem taller almost. It's like this weight's being lifted, and I think it just shows the power of nature. And there's nothing like this anywhere in Garforth. It's this piece of kind of urban nature where sometimes people just come in and sit, and you get this sense of awareness in and amongst the trees and the hedgerows and the plants, and you hear the birds, and you might see other squirrels, and you might see the bees actually busy, with the hives, not necessarily this time of year, but as the weather gets warmer. And I was saying to you earlier, every time I come in this space, it's different. I could come in this space once and then come back a few days later and there'll be something that's different, whether it's something that's starting to bud or flower or you see evidence of animals and things like that, and it's great.
Cool. So I'm just thinking how to phrase this. So what I want to ask is, institutional buildings, obviously you've mentioned some involvement with schools, but hospitals, prisons, old people's homes, like even libraries, I guess, how can you access those spaces? Is that something that you're looking at for projects? So, because again, the health benefits, the skills and knowledge benefits of actually knowing how to grow stuff, they're all useful skills.
Absolutely, yeah. We've had lots of positive conversations. As I say, we're limited on capacity, so again, I want to create more jobs. I want to have a health worker that we've talked about green social prescribing, so GP practices working with kind of other organisations such as ourselves, to bring people to, signpost them to, so they can actually get their hands dirty, reconnect with nature, all the benefits that I just talked about. But I want to have a worker who is trained, not necessarily a trained counsellor, but trained to a level that they can confidently work with a number of individuals. We've had really positive conversations with care homes, because there's a lot of residents in care homes who are bored.
Which affects your health.
It does, and they've got a lot of knowledge about how they grew their own food in the war, or have had an allotment or whatever. And I have this vision. I mean, in Garforth in particular, there's the exact same number of care homes as there are primary schools. I would love to twin them. So every primary school is twinned with a local care home. That primary school goes into the care home, and the residents teach the kids how to grow food in that raised bed that's in the care home. It sounds simple, but there's a whole host of paperwork to sort, and again, it's capacity. It needs someone to kind of to manage that. But again, we've had, I mentioned earlier that relationship with Northern Rail. Wouldn't it be great if every single railway station within the Leeds City region had a space for commuters to help themselves to fresh, healthy, sustainable food? Hospitals, every hospital should have either a well-being garden or a space for patients to go in and, sensory garden, somewhere that, you've got the taste, the smell, of herbs and things like that. And we were involved pretty early on about getting something kicked off at St James's Hospital. So that's coming to fruition, which is great. Universities as well. We've had discussions. The University of Leeds have got a sustainability garden, which we're talking with them about kind of supporting with. And prisons, I had a really great tour of one of the prisons in the area about kind of what they were doing and how some of that could be kind of brought out into the community. One example of it is, and again, this is me wanting to create local jobs. When a lot of the residents of the prison or inmates, residents, when they're released back into the community, with the fact that these prisons are located in Leeds, they're released in Leeds. And quite often they've not got anywhere to go to, they've not got employment. We could offer them something there, potentially. So, yeah, there's been lots of conversations. And things are happening, things are moving, maybe not as quick as I would like, but as I say, Gemma started with us in November. She's done a brilliant job in the first few months of kind of getting out there into communities. Now starting to look at some of those partnerships and things about, making something happening and just having this kind of legacy. Making it work.
Final point, and then I'll pass it over to you to sort of talk about anything you want to. Obviously there's the sense of achievement, personal development and so on. How does it feel to know that you're literally shaping the city?
Wow. It's pretty powerful. I think personally I need to do more kind of reflection on that. I think sometimes for me a lot of it's about the journey, and I think you end up kind of so involved, so engaged, so kind of deep down in the doing that you don't always get to see the progress that you made. And I did reflect briefly on it actually, because we every 2 or 3 months we get all of the incredible edible groups together from across Leeds in the Leeds City Centre. We all meet up and share challenges, successes, all of that. And I'm kind of looking around the room and I'm going, hang on, we've done this. As I say, we do it every 2 or 3 months, and we always do it in January, like the first meet up. So for the past 3 years we've done it in January, and every January it's doubled. So to kind of look around the room and go, wow, we've got more people than we've ever had who are leaders in their community, who are going back into their community, creating more leaders. Yeah, it is this kind of, it's that ripple effect that, yes, we empower, we enable communities, but we're creating leaders, and we're really showing people that they do have the power in whatever way they see. And quite often you've got people who are kind of sitting there going, I want to do something, but I don't know what. And that's where we can help, because a large part of what we do is food related, but if we don't do food, we know someone who actually might be able to help with art or with something else or this or that. There's one of the areas of Leeds that got those big recycle bins, the big orange ones for coffee cups, the yellow ones for bottles and cans and things like that. And we had a small part to play in kind of helping one of the other areas of the city with that. So it's, I think it's just, when you word it like that, it's kind of
Bit much.
a bit much. It kind of, it inspires me to want to do more.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
You are literally physically shaping space. And,
we're trying.
Within the city and focused on the city, and that is expanding. So
we're trying. I mean, we're fortunate that we've got a great relationship with the council, and I think this concept of green space doesn't just have to be green.
Yeah, it doesn't just have to be grass or a lawn.
It doesn't just have to be grass.
Or a wooded space.
Yeah, so. and a lot of developers now have to show the biodiversity net gain of a new development. That doesn't just have to be wildflowers. If we plant food, then that does flower. It does attract bees, it does attract butterflies. And I think that's yeah, we do have a part to play. We do have a part to play. There's no reason why. And actually, do you know what? The next time you go on a walk, have a look around you. You know, look around, because you will see blackberries, you will see apple trees, pear trees, cherry trees. Food is there, but there's no reason why we couldn't have more and actually feed ourselves. You know, if we can feed a city, then we can feed a nation and we can feed the planet. Maybe that's where we go next. But someone once said that to me. They said, you know, Incredible Edible's not going to feed a city. And I think that I was like red rag to a bull in a way, because I think, in a way, I got it. I got what they were saying. It was like you could never have enough food in those raised beds for the city. Well, maybe not. But if you show enough people how they can grow their own food, is that not the same as feeding a city?
Yeah, and you can maybe take pressure off some of the shortages that are forthcoming, and
that's it. Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
So I think that's it. I think we've got a responsibility to be more, you know, show people how they can be more resilient. Because I think we're so used to just sitting at home, ordering food from our phone and getting it delivered in 15 minutes. It's not typically healthy.
And it's so much better than changing your light bulbs and buying a bag for life. It's like, oh, I grew a thing, look at that, I can eat it. Wow, it tastes really great.
Well, it is. It's that sense of achievement, isn't it? It's that sense of achievement of, hang on, I did this, I planted this, I watched it grow, I nurtured it, and then it grew something. You know, we've got chili pants at home that, you know, the kids will never eat, but the kids are interested, and the kids have been watering them. And do you know what? The kids might surprise us because they've nurtured it. They've got that kind of connection and investment. They might go, I'll just give it a little nibble, and that's all it takes. That's all it takes. It's that kind of, again, it's about confidence and empowerment. You know, if they've done it, they're more likely to be invested in it. So.
Okay, so I'll finish up. So basically, throw it over to you. If there's anything that we've not touched on that you want to talk about, or anything upcoming, and then other than that, if you want to give people any socials, where people can find you or find the various groups.
Yeah.
So
I think we've talked about loads, haven't we? I think don't think there's anything else. The only thing I would say is, we've got a website, edibleleeds.org.uk. That's got a map on there of everywhere that we are in the city. If you're in an area that's not on that map, give us a shout. We've got social media. You know, you'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. IncEd Leeds is the handle, and the reason we do that is because Edible Leeds is a lovely guy called Craig who does foraging courses. So look him up as well. But yeah, Incredible Edible is a bit of a mouthful, so our website's edibleleeds.org.uk. And we're there on the socials as well.
Thank you again to Dan for being my guest. If you've never seen it, watch Akira Kurosawa's 1952 film Ikiru. It's one of the best films ever made, and I personally feel every man should watch it. Also, I know it's Tom and Barbara in The Good Life, and Margot and Jerry are the neighbours. Trivia, I fancied Margot because I would. Thanks, as always, to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. If you'd like to know more about Incredible Edible Leeds, go to edibleleeds.org.uk or instagram.com/Incredible Edible Leeds, facebook.com INCED Leeds, or twitter.com INCED Leeds. I'm going to state the obvious here, which I don't usually do, but Dan's a lovely chap and very approachable, so do get involved with Incredible Edible Leeds, and if there isn't one near you, why not start one? If you're in Leeds or from Leeds, if you are Leeds, then please come on the show. Yes, I am speaking to you. I still need to find 878 loiners to interview, so being a guest is the greatest help. You'll get free advertising and media experience, and you'll be part of a unique project in our unique city. Whatever you do, I'm interested to hear about it. You don't have to be online, and you can even be anonymous if you would like. You will enjoy it. Before I go, I have a quick question for you. Obviously, if you have no opinion, I'll decide for myself, but how would you feel if I made the currently freely published full episodes just the first 3 questions of the interview? So it would be, what did you want to be? What do you do now? And how did you get into it? So I just published those bits, and then I put the other answers behind the Patreon paywall so people pay if they want to hear that part. It'll make the free episodes shorter and more consumable and force people who like the show to pay to hear the whole episode. I would then also have something to actually put on the Patreon rather than having to just do more work for free, and I could pick up some Patreons. What do you think? You can email Working Hours at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Okay, that's me. Work for peace and plan with kindness. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Follow Western Studios Leeds on Facebook at facebook.com/Western_Studios_Leeds and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. Western Studios Leeds will help you realise your podcast for only £25 for an hour of podcast work. Need podcast production, recording, editing, or any podcast admin doing? Need it all doing? Do you want or need a podcast host or co-host for your podcast project? Then get in touch with Western Studios Leeds Limited. Email makemypodcast@western-studios.com to get your podcast made. I am available to third sector organisations, small to medium-sized businesses and individuals who want to make podcasts or create other digital audio content. Want to make some fundraising case studies? Want to show off your expertise in your field? Want some help creating your show and format, or just some support learning to podcast and getting going? Whatever your podcast needs, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds. Go to western-studios.com and use the contact page to drop me a message about either Working Hours or about your own podcast project.